What's going on, guys? We are done with the split for North America. We're going to wrap up Qualifier 3, talk about all the storylines going into the major, and show maybe the greatest goal in RLCS history. There's been a lot of great ones so far throughout the split, but this one I think might top them all. So let's get right into it. First, we will start with just talking about North America as a whole. We'll start in Swiss, and then we'll work our way up. So Swiss was an insane day. Honestly, that Friday was one of the most entertaining days in North America history, I thought, because there's so much going on. So let's take a look at what exactly happened in that Swiss, and just talk about all the storylines, basically. So obviously, everyone's playing for major points and all of that. Very important, and that's like always going to be a big storyline, right? Going into Qualifier 3. Then Squishy was also doing his last event. So the retirement party for Squishy, we decided on our show, on the Friday show, as soon as Muffin Man had 2 losses, we were going to show Squishy until he loses or wins out. And I think we did that correctly. And I think we allowed him to have that space, to have that last time on the prime time spotlight of RLCS. And honestly, I think it was well worth it because Muffin Man put on a show. Let's just say that. So, if you look at Muffin Men, it was not pretty at first, but they also had really, really tough matches. They had G2 and then Luminosity. They go 0-3 in both. And at that point, Squishy had 2 goals off stream. Then he goes on stream playing against his best friend in Rocket League, Justin. So, unfortunate by the Rocket League gods there. Comes out. They take the win. They even got Brazil in one of those matches. Let me bring up the actual scorecard here. I guess you can't see all of it because of how I cut it off. But that game 3, 7-1, they lost. They lost 2 in a row. Muffin was up 2, and then Shopify Rebellion was battling back. But Squishy got it done. And on Champions Field, he had some great moments in both series. So that series, they get the win. He stays live, but it did knock Shopify Rebellion out of that major race. They were a little bit of an underdog going in to get it, but, you know, like if they would have made top 4, if things go their way, it was very, very possible. So on top of that, then they go up against M80, another team in that major race. It might be more difficult of opposition because M80 have been so good in Swiss. And to speak on M80 really quick, they finally got their first loss in Swiss. That was to Omelette 3-0, which seemed pretty surprising at the time. Then they lose to Luminosity in 5 games. And then they go up against Muffin Man. And it came down to 0 seconds on the clock, game 5. And Jorius, I believe it was, put it home and gave M80 the win. Squishy had one of the best shots in his career as his final goal. It's like of his career. It was fantastic. Now, I'm not going to show any clips from that series today. But tomorrow, I'm actually going to do a walkthrough, like a point of view Squishy Muffins of that game 5. So we'll do that in its own video, kind of talk about him and just do it properly. So we'll save that for tomorrow. I'm going to take the replay file and get his point of view, and we'll watch that through. So that'll be the video for tomorrow. So maybe they do survive and they do make it through, but that was it for Squishy. He came on the pre-show on Saturday, did a great interview. He had an interview with CJ as well. I assume we'll do another interview with him at the major. He is going to Copenhagen. So if you are going to Copenhagen and you want to meet him, there's no better time, right? He's not competing. He's there for content and for fun with Rule 1. So that's probably your best bet to meet Squishy is to go to Copenhagen. So like if you're planning on going, try and keep a look at on Rule 1 socials or his socials to see when they're doing any type of meet and greet with the fans, because I assume that line's going to get long. So hats off to him. Amazing career. But we'll continue for the day. Let's just go up the list, I guess. This is what we usually do. And just speak about all these teams very, very quickly. Like Gen.G, they were boot camping this time. They wanted to make that one last hurrah. A lot of teams were boot camping only in Regional 3. And I think there's some arguments to be like, should have these teams been doing it the entire time? Why do you wait till the last minute? You know, it's like my high school homework. I'm waiting till the last night to write like a 12-page paper. So, funny story, really, really quick. I'm not gonna be long. In college, one time I waited till the last day to write. I think it was a 10-page paper. or something like that. Waited to the very last day and then put it in. Like I think it was a solid B or something like that. And I was like, that's good enough for me. Like I don't really care. Anyway, moving on. So that's what Gen.G tried to do. It did not work. They got a reverse swept twice by Boulevard and Young Whippersnappers. Like the Pirates on the Boat, I think you can expect that a bit. Like I think most people had Pirates on a Boat ranked higher than Gen.G. But the other two were kind of surprising. Garrett G put out a tweet like he doesn't know what's next, and like we'll have to see. And that's going to happen a lot with a lot of these teams that don't make the major. What is next for them? So that'll be a whole nother conversation later on down the road about roster changes and all that. Because again, only a 2 splits now, so you got to make 1 roster move and hope to make worlds. Shopify Rebellion was next. Lose to Space Station. I don't even know what the no logo team is. Oh, it's Snowmen. So they lose to Space Station in 5, so that's pretty close. We'll actually take a look at their games here real quick to see what the scoreline was. I wasn't sure what the scoreline was there. Just a 1-goal game in Game 5, but they do take the loss there. They go up against Snowmen, and then again another 1-goal game loss. So Shopify Rebellion was so close yet so far. Going to that last round versus Muffin Men, and they lose there by 2 goals in Game 5. So a little bit unlucky. Just didn't have the ice for this tournament, and Shopify Rebellion also out of that major race. Young Whippersnappers were here basically to play spoiler, very, very likely, to see if they can make their first top 8. They failed to do so. They didn't look that great throughout most of their matches, except when they took down NRG. They kind of got smacked around by the other teams. So Omelet, well, I shouldn't say smacked around, I guess. Maybe that's a little harsh. But, I mean, they lost 2 2-goal games. It was a 3-1, so it wasn't incredibly close. Then OG and Space Station, obviously tough opponents. I'm not saying they're not. They had a tough road. But they only scored 1 goal there. And at least it was a lot of 1-goal games. But they do take out Energy, as we saw earlier, which you can't see the entire scoreboard. Sorry about that. And then they scored 3 goals against Space Station. Honestly, mostly just a tough road for them. There are times when you can get by and make it through Swiss a little bit easier to at least make it to the 2-2 round, and then you have like a puncher's chance to make it into the top 8. But this time around, the Swiss gods were not kind to the young Whippersnappers, and they go home. But I'd say a pretty great split for them for what they probably expected. To make it to 2 of these tournaments, I think that's pretty solid. Snowmen. Same thing, Gen.G 03. They beat Shopify Rebellion. That's a good win. They lose to Dig. They lose to Boulevard. So Boulevard actually made a run. Boulevard up here, Delta, Alraz, and Repeat. They made a run, so they were doing pretty well. But at the end of the day, they also didn't make it. But Snowmen, kind of the same thing. I think this is a good starting point for Snowmen. And to make it to 2 of the tournaments, again, that's a pretty big accomplishment. So we'll see where they go from there. Muffin Men, we already talked about them. Boulevard, again, lost to TSM, beat Energy, beat Snowmen, lost to basically everyone above them, right? Except for Energy is the one team they beat that maybe they weren't supposed to, right? So Boulevard maybe, and I guess Snowmen was that other conversation of which bubble team is better, right? But they do get some pretty good wins. They take Luminosity to 5 games, which is pretty wild because Luminosity just likes content, I guess. But they don't get it done. It was Game 4 overtime. So Boulevard was up 2-1 in the series. Overtime, they lose Game 4. And then Game 5, they lose as well. So they almost knocked out Luminosity. If they were to knock them out, Luminosity would have been in a lot more trouble trying to make the major. They would have, I guess, technically qualified based on the other results that happened. But still, would have been sweating just a little bit more. Next up, we got Dignitas. They also boot camped. We're doing that like last minute boot camp to try and make it, and they failed to do so as well. They do take down Luminosity in round 1. It's a good result. Lose to Gen.G, beat Snowmen, lose to OG, lose to Space Station. I don't think they really have an argument of like the format was bad for us or anything like that. Like I think they were just honestly not a good enough team right now to be top 4 in North America. We'll see how they grow. We'll see what happens. But I don't think they have any arguments to blame a format, right? They just were, they're like a top 8 team, somewhere in that 5 to 8 range. I think there's arguments all across the board there. But unfortunately, they fell just a bit short. Pirates on a Boat. Pirates on a Boat were incredibly consistent this year, like pretty much always beating teams below them, losing to teams above them. Kind of the story here, and maybe a little bit of unluckiness in this specific bracket. Um, but Energy, they beat. They were supposed to. TSM was the one that they weren't supposed to lose to. But obviously, what we saw out of TSM this weekend, they really played well. So it's hard to fault it too much. Boulevard, they win 3-0, then they lose to G2 and M80. So their last two rounds were pretty rough. But at the same time, they don't really have any arguments either. Like, if they are that consistent top 8 team and they beat everyone below them and lose to everyone above them, that's still not a top 4 team, right? They're in that 5 to 8 range as well. But I think it was a good split all in all for Pirates. I would even say it's a good split for Dignitas. I know their expectations might have been skewed because of the offseason and what happened, where they won 2 tournaments, but I still think it's not the end of the world. And I think that they can grow from that and make a push for split 2, unless there's roster changes, right? Which there probably will be by everyone. But yeah, M80 make it through again, but they finally get some losses. We kind of talked about them earlier. Space Station Gaming, they play G2 again in Swiss. They lose to OG, though, and they get swept. And the reason why they played G2 was because they went to 5 games versus Shopify. So, again, they really had one qualifier where it was not their fault, at least, of like who they played in Swiss. That was qualifier 1, I believe. They were the 1 seed going into the 2-0 round. They played G2 as the 4 seed. Outside of that, they could have done a lot better to clean up some of these wins, to try and get better seeding to avoid some of these teams. But yes, I can see an argument to be like, the format got to us, right? Like, the format won this one over Space Station. I could see them having an argument. At the end of the day, though, it's 3 qualifiers. It's going to happen. A team's going to get unlucky occasionally. Space Station, there was ways to avoid it, but it didn't happen. And unfortunately for them, they won't be at the major. They're a big question mark of like, where are they? Are they 3, 4, 5? That's probably the 3 spots I would put them at in terms of power rankings. So where do you put them, right? So Space Station, it's weird because like they don't qualify, but they're still in a great spot to make it to Worlds, obviously. As long as you are top 4 for Major 2, then you're good to go, right? So we'll see how it all plays out. Luminosity, I honestly don't know what to do with this team because they just lose random series sometimes. Like, they lose to Dig, they lose to Omelet. Like, this time around, it was at least a pretty tough road. And not even tough road. They beat Boulevard in 5. Like, I don't even, like, Luminosity, you got to be more consistent. I just don't know what to do. They were very, very fortunate, I would say, in Qualifier 2 to get the bracket they did. A bunch of other teams, though, also had that same bracket, but they were the ones who actually performed. But Luminosity's got to be pretty happy that they got that bracket because I just don't know with them. So sometimes I see their gameplay and I'm like, you don't need to play in front of the ball all the time and go for like, I don't know. They're questionable to me. I would say there are the weakest team coming out of North America going into the major. That doesn't mean they can't perform. I know Redo's on land. He has some great performances, so but I just wasn't impressed with them, at least in Qualifier 3. Omelets. They finally woke up and finally played like a team that could play some ball, right? And they made some moves here. Young Whippersnappers, M80, and Luminosity, the wins. They lost to TSM. Well done by them. They took G2 to 7 games with defense, which was an odd series. But they still took them to 7 games. So well done to them. Maybe they can build off that for split 2. G2 finally lose to Gen.G. They got the 4 seed. Honestly, like, unluckily, I would say. Because 3-0, 3-1, 3-1, 2-3. Like, that's a pretty decent, like, plus-minus. Like, that might be the highest plus-minus for a seed for, like, all season in NA. Like, I haven't gone back and checked, but, you know, it is what it is. So they played Omelet. Like, I don't think they really mind that option because I don't think they wanted to play Luminosity. So G2, we'll talk about that more later. OG getting the job done. Lose to M80 in round 1. They 3-0 everyone else, including a 3-0 versus Space Station and Dig. Huge wins there. Gen.G just doing some work. Went to 5 games, though, versus Dig, which is interesting. But they do get the job done. And the TSM, maybe a Mickey run, sure. But, I mean, that's also because of other teams doing well in certain spots, like Omelet 3-0 and M80. So, what can you do, right? If, like, M80 wins that, then people wouldn't say it is that much of a Mickey run. But instead, they get Boulevard, Pirates on a Boat, and then Omelet. And, yeah, it was definitely a Mickey-ish run, but you play what's in front of you. Moving on to the bracket here real quick. TSM versus M80. Very close set. M80 got to find a way to win, man. You just got to. And I think both these teams, they both didn't look like top 4 North American teams, in my opinion, in that matchup. But TSM, hats off to them, man. It was their first ever playoff bracket, and they get the job done. Game 7 overtime. Fantastic. G2 Omelet, very, very defensive series. G2, my one concern with G2 was if teams park the bus or just play good defense, like, how do you beat them on the offensive side? Like, instead of, like, trying to wait for the mistake, which I think they did a lot previously, or just play that pressure ball, which pressure ball is obviously great. But in that series, they didn't look great, but they do back it up later versus TSM. So in that TSM series, it was just nuts. Their offense was clicking, and this was against the best defense of the entire tournament. And G2 put up 4.25 goals per game versus TSM, so they looked much, much better on the final day. Gen.G taking down Space Station yet again. Wasn't really close. Like, I guess there was 2 overtimes, but it felt like Gen.G was going to take that. OG and Luminosity. Luminosity, I hate you. If you would have won, we would have had a 5-way tiebreaker for the last spot. But no, OG clutching it up in that back room church gospel place, it looked like. I don't know. That wood paneling on the wall. Oh, I don't know. Anyway, OG, they do get the win. They clutch it up. The pros were right. Pro Power Rankings ranked OG number 4. They got the number 4 seed. Congrats to them. They lose to Gen.G later. Gen.G looked great. The first killer looked great throughout the entire tournament. And then finally, Gen.G versus G2. Gen.G, complete dominance. The only game G2 won was literally because they scored 2 like top 10 goals of a split. And I'm going to show you one of those now. I'm going to go to full cam while I set this up. But this goal might be the greatest goal I've ever seen in terms of skill. There's different goals like the pinch goal on the net by Toxic, which is one of my favorite goals of all time because that's just fun to watch. But this goal was just nuts. This is coming out from Daniel here. And let's take a look.
Dribbling above first killer, Chronic in the net, so was Jack the Fuck! Daniel! He's a hero!
What a special play from Daniel! He half flips into an air dribble into a flip reset.
But now Jack
Look at this.
gets it out.
Sorry, I played it a little earlier. Look at that. Look at that catch.
Killer, Chronic in the net, so was Jack the Fuck!
Look at that catch. That catch is absolutely insane. He gets bumped around a bit, or not bumped around, but just lands a little awkwardly, makes up for it with that half flip out into the catch. Look at this. Or not even a half flip. Like he does his flip, a pre-flip catch, which is so incredibly hard to do. He's got 0 boost by the end of this. Let's go back on the boost meter here. He's got 86. He's got to turn around in the air, pre-flip, catch that perfectly, then get the flip reset perfectly top left corner. You could say maybe the defense like Chronic should just pressure a little bit quicker here, but I don't even know if it matters. Because if he does, I don't think Appjack's getting into that corner. This play is just absolutely nuts. Probably the best goal we will see in RLCS for this year. This might be the best goal ever in terms of skill. And I'm going to put this out there for you guys. We'll probably do a top 10 goals of the split. If you can think of any, and I'll probably do a call to arms on Twitter at some point. If you can think of any that are in that list, feel free to write them down in the comments below. I'm going to look at them. I'm going to comb through. I have at least 5 I know that I want on there. But there's going to be plays from other regions that I miss and all that stuff. So let me know, because maybe we'll even use it for the first pre-show of the Copenhagen Major. So let's build it together. Let's do it. But I'll call to arms probably next week on Twitter as well for something like that. But Daniel, out of this world. Gen.G, though, was amazing. No question about it. I think Power Rankings are going to be very interesting. Me and Wave are going to do the Power Rankings sometime this week. we'll see where Gen.G lands, where G2 lands. Where would you have them power ranked? That's what I want to know. Where would you have Gen.G and G2? Where would you have Space Station power ranked right now in North America? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys for your time. Thank you for all the support throughout this split. North America is done. The online portion is done. I know technically it's not announced, but I will be in Copenhagen. I will be there. So unless, some travel thing happens. But I'll be there. So you can see me there. If you're going, come say hi. But thank you guys for watching. We'll see you tomorrow for Squishy's point of view replay analysis of his last game. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.